quite happy to take a pay cut. It's where that money goes. That seems to be the big issue.
Exactly, Dan. This is at the heart of all the conversations, the discussions that players have had either with the club or with the PFS, which is the union for the players, and also with the Premier League. Every meeting is the same. The players are obviously fine, and they know they want to have pay cuts to be able to relocate that money somewhere, but they want to know what exactly where that money goes, what it's used for, because what they don't want, for example, is that their clubs cut their wages and then those cuts become more dividends for their owners, who are already, for most of them, really rich and very profitable. So that's the issue right now. The players have no problem, or at least the one I've spoken to, have no problems at all about doing their bit, and they even want to as soon as possible. But it's all about where that money goes. And maybe we'll end up in a situation where individually the players will give whatever they want to charities, to hospices, to hospitals, to the NHS or whatever, on another part, different part than what the club want to do, because at the moment they can't find any sort of agreement either.
Craig, as a former player, how would you feel in this situation?
I don't think many, if any, would have an issue and do have an issue, Dan, taking a decrease in wages when staff members at their football club and other football clubs are having to take pay cuts or indeed go on leave of absence. I don't think there is an issue with that. But I've got a huge issue with a lot of the people out there pontificating about footballers in particular being the focal point of this debate. Just because these young men are high earners, most of them come from non-privileged backgrounds, have earned the right to be earning that money. Whether you and I agree about the amount of money these days is immaterial. It's the market forces that dictate what players are paid. And quite frankly, I think footballers in general have become, and the football industry has become, an easy target of, well, you know, let's take the money off them because they're earning X, Y, and Z, and let's give it to this person and that person. Yes, the money should go to make sure the people at their businesses are not losing out and their families are affected. Yes, the money should probably go to charities, NHS, hospitals, if they can, and filter it that way, as long as they know where it's going. But how many politicians are putting their hands up to say, I'll take a pay cut? How many bankers are putting their hands up to say, I'll take a pay cut? How many property developers, stockbrokers, multi-millionaires and billionaires, how many are putting their hands up? Or how many are people saying, well, these should take pay cuts as well? But no, the easy target is the footballers. And yes, maybe they have been a little bit slow to make a statement and make some decisions. But I would be surprised if there are any well-paid football players at clubs who want to sit back and watch other people, other employees of the people that they work for go and struggle and see their family struggle. I just don't see that as being a realistic finger to point at them. And I think it's been a really easy target, Dan, for a lot of people in the public eye to say, look at these greedy footballers, they're not doing enough.
So, Jules, how is this all going to end with the players and the clubs?
It's a good question, Dan. I think at some point they will have to make a decision whether the players want to go individually by themselves and decide what to do with their own money. They can make individual donations to whoever they want. They can decide to take a pay cut, but don't give that money back to their club if they're not convinced or sure of what those clubs are going to do with that money, to avoid, as we've been saying, that money going back to dividends to the rich owners, for example, and that the money goes to the right place. It will all depend. What I think we will be not seeing very soon now, and we saw it already with Liverpool deciding today to reverse the decision to go on that furlough scheme, because clearly the outrage was so big, and I've got no sympathy for them because I don't get the whole thing. Oh, but they listened to their fans and they changed their mind. They shouldn't have gone there in the first place anyway. But I think we won't see many other Premier League clubs right now decided to go on that furlough scheme and instead trying to find an agreement with their own players to decide what to do with that money, those wage cuts they could get, to make best use of that money going to the NHS, to the hospitals, hospices, charities, whatever. But I think Liverpool made the right choice, and I can expect more Premier League clubs to not go on that furlough scheme, but instead find a direct agreement with their own players to be able to use that money wisely.
Now, to hear more from Jules, well, less really, because he's with Gab and Gab doesn't let him talk, you can listen to the latest edition of the Gab and Jules podcast, which dropped today. Just go and download it over on the website. Both Neymar and Mbappe future discussed on the front page of L'Equipe today as we welcome Julien Laurent in. Jules, let's talk about Mbappe first. What's being said?
Well, it's being said that the current situation and the fact that this whole pandemic will certainly have an impact, a big impact on the transfer window in terms of how long, when it will start, but also how much clubs will be able to pay, because a lot of them will have loss of earnings as well to come in place in the transfer window. So they might not have as much money as they thought they would have to spend this summer, which is good for PSG because that means that Real Madrid will probably think twice about trying to come and get Mbappe. And actually, as we've been saying on the show for many weeks now, I don't think, and I've been told that Real Madrid are not going to come this summer for Mbappe, but maybe more next summer, the following one, the summer 2021. And for Neymar, of course, the noise coming out from Barcelona about them wanting him back and him maybe wanted to go back. Well, it seems that this one has really cooled down as well. And also to the fact that how much money will Barcelona have this summer for the transfer window? We don't know, but it certainly won't be enough at the moment, it looks like, for what PSG would be asking for Neymar.
Now, it's interesting when you take a look at some quotes that have been revealed over the last couple of days regarding Neymar, some big names talking about him. Zico to Gazzetta saying, I really like Ney. His way of playing is incredible, but he has to be more professional like Ronaldo and Messi, who live for football. Ney has too many thoughts that distract him. I spoke to him recently and asked him to be more professional. Meanwhile, Del Bosque, the former Spain coach, to Mundo Deportivo said, for me, he's not a good example to follow. And for the record, I do believe he's a fantastic player. He's definitely on my list of top 5 players in the world, but on the pitch, he cheats and fakes too much. Let's welcome Frank Leboeuf in. Frank, what do you make of those quotes?
Well, it's without any surprise that I read those comments from big stars of football. Zico from Brazil, alongside Pelé and so many other big players, former players, have already said that Neymar, and like everybody thinks, is a fantastic player, but needs to be more professional and must behave in another way when he's on the field. And so said Mr. Del Bosque, who been in charge of many top players and bring to the national team to the top level, but knows exactly what is and who is a fantastic player and who is a fantastic player without behaving properly. I think that's the problem with Neymar. If he carries on like that, we will say, yes, he was at the same level than Messi and Ronaldo, but he wasn't somebody who should have been an example. And that's the main concern for Neymar. He still has the time to change and reverse the thoughts of many people, but it's the time to do so. Otherwise, it's going to be too late, and it will be a pity for him to think that he should have been the best player in the world, but he wasn't because of his behavior.
Jules is a regular attendee of his parties. I imagine you're going to defend your man.
Yeah, of course I will defend it. Yeah, everyone can be more professional. You could be Dan, Frankie could be, I certainly could be. And this is the life he's leading. Maybe when he will be a bit more mature or grown up, but he's 28 already, so he doesn't have much time left. But maybe he will understand things differently. Maybe he will look after himself more. Maybe he will go out less. Maybe there will be less parties. But Ronaldinho was partying a lot as well, and no one had anything to do at the time. And he was still a great player, and he won the Ballon d'Or and the Champions League and everything else. So I still think that you could have, as long as you take responsibility for it, which I think Neymar does, you have the lifestyle that you want. Yeah, of course, he probably would be better and be a better player if he was like Ronaldo, but will he be for sure? Maybe that's part of who he is as well, the partying and the lifestyle that he has.
What about Jules' actions on the pitch Del Bosque mentioned, the diving and the cheating?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a bit too much of it. Let's not forget as well, and again, I'm playing devil advocate there, and I understand what Del Bosque said, and I respect it. But Neymar is the player right now in the whole world, with Messi, but above everyone else, who gets kicks the most and who gets fouled the most. And I think there's a point where maybe sometimes you dive to protect yourself. Sometimes you've had enough as well of being kicked all around the pitch. And maybe there's a lot of theatricals in his behavior as well. Maybe that's part of him, how he learned to play the game in Brazil and that kind of stuff. But let's not forget how much fouled he gets and how much kicked he gets through every single game he plays.
Frank, if he called you up and asked you for one piece of advice, what would you tell Neymar?
I would say that I love him. I love the way he can play football and he can be the top player. But that I can't stand the fact that when he's a little bit touched by a player, he goes on the floor and play the comedy and pretending that he's almost dying and everything. I can't bear that. I can't bear that with all the players that I played against because I was a defender and I barely touched them and they were exaggerating the thing. I don't care about the party. He does what he wants with his life, his private life. But on the field, because of the kids and because he's an example for young players, don't do that. I don't see Messi pretending. I don't see Ronaldo pretending that much. He's the king of pretending. That's what bothers me the most. So I will tell him, if you don't do that, you can have the haircut you want. You can go partying anytime you want. I'm the first defender of Ronaldinho, the first defender of Romario, because on the pitch, they were doing the job, which is not for 100% the case for Neymar.
Good stuff, guys. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to follow the future transfer gossip regarding Neymar, Mbappe, and the rest of the big stars around the world. Go over to the website and click on Transfer Talk. Today marks 25 years since the first MLS match. Lots of articles over on the website commemorating it, including this oral history of year one. And to mark the occasion, we welcome in two former players, Herculez Gomez and Ali Moreno. Ali, you are older, so I'll start with you first. The big takeaway from 25 years of MLS for you.
Well, you mentioned older, so I'm going to take you back to early days of Major League Soccer. And when I was drafted with the LA Galaxy, we were just coming off a summer in which Major League Soccer had decided to contract two teams, the Miami Fusion and the Tampa Bay Mutiny. And so in that offseason, all of a sudden, Major League Soccer was on the verge of shutting down, on the cusp of shutting down. There were financial difficulties, there were challenges, a lot of uncertainty. And now instead of 12 teams, you had 10 teams and 10 teams that were barely hanging on, where you had to have owners with multiple teams within the league. So the Hunts and Phil Anschutz and everything that they've done for this league to try to maintain it and keep it alive. And now you spin this forward years later, and where we are in Major League Soccer, where seemingly we have 100 teams in place and more are coming, it just gives you an idea of the growth of this league and the growth of this product. And so the contrast and the comparisons are there from what was my early days in Major League Soccer and what is now. The salaries are there. What you have is a level of interest that wasn't quite there back then. The stadiums. There's a lot to be optimistic about with Major League Soccer. I just really think that we have to be very mindful of what the realistic expectations should be for a league that is just 25 years old. It's very, very young in compared to other leagues around the world and compared to other clubs around the world. And so while we appreciate the growth, we also have to understand that there's still a long way to go.
Herc, what about you? What stands out from all these years of MLS?
I think Ali is 100% right when you talk about the growth. I remember coming into Major League Soccer in 2012, and I wasn't even worried about trying to get a game, and I was worried about trying to get a training session. And I was 19 years old, and Ali will tell you I was running on the side, waiting for the guys, the first team, to stop training so my training would begin. They didn't have the academies that they had today. They didn't have the facilities that they had today. Ali talks about where the league was at that point. Well, I will talk about a few years later when I started playing Chivas USA and the $7 million price tag that was that franchise. You look at the franchises now to date, 300 million plus, and they keep going up. You have cities vying for opportunities to come into Major League Soccer. That growth, there's going to be responsibility that comes with it. And I agree with what Ali is saying. Let's be mindful of where we're at and where we're going. But if you look at the league when we started, and where it is today, I mean, for God's sakes, we were at the Rose Bowl training a baseball field on a ball diamond, and now the Galaxy have their own stadium. The LAFC has their own stadium in the same city. It keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's a league of choice today. There are players in their prime choosing to come to Major League Soccer. That wasn't the case back then. You had players who were at the end of their careers in their retirement years looking to settle down in the United States. Now it's Canada, it's U.S., it's prime-time players coming here and choosing to set their careers forth here.
And let me touch on that as well, Dan. it's not only a league of where players are choosing to come to Major League Soccer, but it's also a league that now is respected enough to where you can send players abroad as well. You can sell players. And so then you become a player within the business aspect of the game, where you can actually nurture talent, develop talent, and then sell that talent and use that money to finance your own academies or to finance whatever projects you have with the first team. These are things that were not happening 20 years ago, and certainly were not happening 25 years ago. And so I can just tell you that there's a lot of things and a lot of reasons to be very optimistic about what Major League Soccer has become and what the future holds for Major League Soccer. Let's just, again, go back to a very, very simple thought. It's still of doubts or any sort of questions, and you're able to perform in a pressure environment. I think that's the highest pinnacle for any player. As for the league in itself, I don't know if it is my favorite moment, but the most significant moment, I have to say, in this league has to be the arrival of David Beckham. It didn't particularly translate into anything especially positive for me personally, but I do think that for the league, it was an elevation into putting your product in a different stage and making sure that Major League Soccer was now appealing to a larger number of people. And in those early days of Major League Soccer, it was a struggle to appeal to the pop culture market, if you will. David Beckham built that bridge, and I think it allowed Major League Soccer to position itself in a better place.
What about you, Herc?
Yeah, personal moment, I would have to go back to 2005. 2004, I was let go from the LA Galaxy. How could you not put the arrival of David Beckham into that stratosphere? For the first time ever, Major League Soccer was being seen on an international scale. Not national, international. The Galaxy name was all over the world. David Beckham was easily one of the biggest players on this planet. Nobody else off the field even came close to him, and it was the beginning of what is to come. He was the first designated player to sign with Major League Soccer. So David Beckham ruled. Because of him, we saw the Thierry Henrys, the David Villas, the Frank Lampards. We saw what is the Sebastian Jovincos, the Joseph Martinez, the Miguel Almiron. It's all because of David Beckham. He set Major League Soccer down a path that forever changed its future. So easily the biggest signing, the best moment, and for me personally, a very proud moment for Major League Soccer.
Meanwhile, Hercules is on. Every time he's on, he's got to plug his show over on YouTube, where of course he
Which
has
one? Which show?
Really good
Which
interviews. It's the Hercules Gomez show with many guests. The latest one will drop tomorrow, where he's talking to Charlie Davies.
If I hit it with enough pace, he wasn't going to be able to stop it. And it hits back on that. I had that moment where I jumped out of my body and I could see everything. I looked at the stadium. No one was moving. It was
95,000.
Quiet, except for the 2,000 American fans that came to the game. I could see them jumping and going nuts. I run to the corner flag, and no one else comes. And I'm like, what the hell? But Michael Bradley comes, and I'm celebrating. I'm seeing these things, and Michael Bradley comes to pull me away, to bring me back to our side. I'm like, is this not the best game you can play? Why are we not celebrating? And then after at halftime, after the game, they're like, because we're not wasting our energy. And did you see what came at you in the corner? We're not trying to get hit by coins and batteries and bottles and bags. Like, come on now.
Charlie, always great value, Herc. What else did you talk about?
I've never been part of an interview like this. You know Charlie Davies, he's one of the most positive, contagious people that are out there with his positivity and always smiling. But to hear him talk about the moment he wakes up from that car accident, to hear him talk about the difficulties he had, not only just trying to be a regular person after that, coming to grips that his career might be over, and the whole time setting his goals on playing again instead of walking again. It's miraculous. I've never been part of an interview like this. It was uplifting. It was moving. I hope you check it out, Dan. I know you and Charlie are friends. It was really something else.
That drops tomorrow, by the way, 1 o'clock over on our YouTube channel. Herc's many other shows are there as well. He's there with Sebi. Sebi getting very, very angry about Carlos Vela. But for now, thank you very much to Ali and Herc. Interesting stuff from Willian talking about his future at Chelsea to Fox Sports Brazil. Everyone knows my contract is up in a few months, and it looks like it'll be very difficult to secure an extension. I think it's unlikely that I'll renew. Well, Jules and Craig are back with us. Jules, Coutinho seems to be the man that many are saying will come in and replace the Brazilian.
Yeah, I don't really believe this one. I haven't been told if it was true or not yet, but just Coutinho doesn't really strike me as the kind of player that Frank Lampard would like in his team. For Coutinho to work somewhere, the team has to be built around him. And I don't think it would be the case at all at Chelsea. And if you think that Hakim Ziyech is coming as well, it will be there for next season, that you still have players like Pulisic and Hudson-Odoi, obviously Tammy Abraham, even Mason Mount can play wide and has played wide at times this season. Plus a very strong midfield three where you could maybe even expect Chelsea to go and buy players in the summer. I don't think there's room for Coutinho then. And also Coutinho would be very expensive in terms of wages, in terms of transfer fees as well. And for me, he's not a replacement at all for Willian, who, by the way, I think is the right thing to do to let him go, and Pedro as well.
Craig?
Yeah, he's clearly not a direct replacement because those guys are pretty much wide guys. Coutinho being a playmaker, you got Mason Mount who was given that role quite a lot last season, a player that Frank Lampard trusts, a young man that was given his head. Julian's mentioned all the other players that are available for the wide positions. I do think that the likelihood is that the two senior players probably will go. And also Coutinho needs to find, I think, a home for the next 3 or 4 years. But I'm just not sure, and I agree with Jules, I'm not quite sure he fits into that mould. Lampard likes his playmakers to be hard-working as well, and, closing people down and playing the pressing game. And, he's not quite in that mould, and he's had a tough time. The money's going to be big as well. And don't forget, there's going to be a budget cap for Lampard like every other manager at Chelsea in the Premier League. Abramovich has shown less of an appetite to spend huge money these days. And their most important position out there is not a playmaker, it's a centre forward. And we know when you're after a top-notch centre forward to get you over the line, that's big bucks. It's big bucks in terms of transfer fee, and it's big bucks in terms of wages. So even if we did want Philip Coutinho to come in because he's a very good player, I think finances might dictate it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's quite something, isn't it? When you take a look at his transfer history, let's not forget, back in 2018, January transfer window, Barcelona paid 145 million euros for the Brazilian. Now we're questioning whether or not he could start in a Chelsea team. Ali, I want to start with you. Does this transfer make any sense to you?
Let me first address the quick math. You just said 145 million euros for his transfer, and now the reported number for him to go to Chelsea would be around 80 million euros. That means that Barcelona, a team who we talked about last week in being some sort of financial woe situation, they're willing to take a 65 million euro loss on a player. They'd rather lose 65 million euros than have this player walk in the door of that locker room again and be useful for Barcelona. That tells you a lot what they think about the player and what Coutinho has become. Now, we spin it forward to Chelsea and see what that means for Chelsea. It doesn't quite match what Chelsea's been trying to do. We've been sold on the idea that Chelsea's going to go with a youth movement. And so it's Christian Pulisic and Callum Hudson-Odoi. And those are the guys who are going to be playing on the outside. And you just bring in Hakim Ziyech as well. And so he would be an answer too. So where is the place for Coutinho to play? A guy that likes to play on the outside, drifting inside, well, it's something similar as to the three guys that I just mentioned would be doing. And so I don't see the space for him. I don't see the place for him. And I certainly would not be paying that amount of money for a player who clearly has had a difficult time making his mark, whether that was at Barcelona or Bayern Munich. And again, I repeat, Barcelona is willing to take a major loss on a player because they simply do not want him anywhere around the club.
Frank Leboeuf, would you like to see Coutinho at your old club?
Well, to be really honest and frank, no. And we already talked about him. I think Coutinho is a good player. And then I'm not even trying to be harsh on him. I think I want to find Barcelona guilty for the situation because they put a price, 145 million on Coutinho, who I think doesn't belong to that league. So now it's hard to reverse the system. It's hard to think that you can even the price, but lose and accept to lose like 65 million euros for a transfer. But if you check on the quality of Coutinho, of course he's a talented player, of course he's a good player, but does he belong to the top player? Allow me to have some doubts about that. When I see Neymar, when I see Ronaldo, when I see Messi, when I see Mbappe, I see top players, and Coutinho has a price of a top player, and I don't want to make a statement, but I'm not sure he has the quality of a top player. And now, how do you reverse the system? And Adali said, how do you put Coutinho in a team, and how do you rate him now? So now you talk about Chelsea, ready to put 80 million euros. 80 million euros, I think is too much for a player where you're not sure he's going to find the level he used to be at Liverpool, and he's not anymore. But at the same time, having three players like named Ali, we can be as good as Coutinho without costing that amount of money. So it's why I think Coutinho shouldn't go to Chelsea, because there is no room for him, and I think it's too much spent for a player where we don't know, in fact, the standard.
Frank Leboeuf and Ali Moreno, thank you very much. By the way, Frank with us on Extra Time today. He's joined by Craig Burley. We ask him, Beckenbauer or Maldini? Be sure to check it out.
Ooh.
Some great viral videos doing the rounds at the moment. This certainly near the top of the tree. Brilliant stuff from the youngster in his back garden, recreating all of these famous goals, including Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney retweeted it very much, giving the strike a seal of approval. That brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you very much to everyone that's been on. If you want more, well, stay tuned to Extra Time, where I'll be joined by Craig Burley and Frank Leboeuf. Welcome into the latest edition of Extra Time. Thank you for your tweets, Craig Burley and Frank Leboeuf with me. Before we get to your questions, Craig, how are you? How is quarantine treating you? Golf, I imagine, keeping you sane?
I'm not off the bench today, Extra Time, so, I was penciled in to do this, so I've not been taking... The subs board hasn't come up for me yet, but I'm adhering to all the guidelines, Daniel. You know me, I'm a stickler for the rules. And so and anyway, who doesn't want to social distance from Stevie Nicol? I mean, that's a given anyway, isn't it?
That's very true. Frank, how are you in Paris? Because you've been doing this longer than most.
Yes, I've been stuck in my house for like a month now, and it's fine. I finished my third book. I'm starting the fourth one tonight, and I watched many TV shows, I have to say, and we share some good times with my wife. We talk a lot, like we never been talking, so it's a good point.
Oh boy!
I imagine she's been listening a lot, Frank. Right, Beckenbauer or Maldini?
No, she's
Frank?
bored. She doesn't listen to me.
Yeah, that's true. Right, listen to me then. Beckenbauer or Maldini?
Oh, definitely Beckenbauer, because the first World Cup that I remember is the one in '74. I was 6 years old, and Beckenbauer was first a midfielder, and then dropped back to become one of the biggest, or is maybe the biggest sweeper that I ever seen. And it was so elegant, so powerful, so efficient. Maldini has a fantastic career, but he's more a left back than a central defender. And Franz Beckenbauer is, for me, the idol that I have to be. I have to say that my father wanted to call me Franz, like Beckenbauer, not like the France, the country, France. And my mother said, no way. So it became Frank, like in an American way. But there is a little bit of Franz Beckenbauer in me, I guess. A little bit, really.
Who have you got, Craig?
That doesn't quite... I don't think that was going to work. Was it Franz Leboeuf? I think it's not going to work, is it?
No, for sure not.
No, I didn't see... I never saw Beckenbauer play, obviously. I saw Maldini play, but I like it. Difficult one, really. Can I give you my standard response, Dan?
No. Who would be a better manager between Frank and Craig, Frank?
Oh, me. I've got a better temperament.
True. true. I'm having a hard time with the new generation. Psychologically talking, you know, I'm not sure I will be able to cope with the situation. So I will say Craig.
I tell you, I've had this conversation with Nicol briefly, Dan, and he reckons I couldn't. He reckons I wouldn't be able. I said to him I'd change. I understand because you got to deal with a lot of people, a lot of players, and you got to have a little bit of come and go. He said I don't have enough come and go with people and players. So, but I reckon I'm not saying I'm saying I would be great at it, but I would definitely change my outlook a little bit when you're having to deal with people. But I agree with Frank. I think try to do it these days is a lot more difficult, particularly with the money around and the egos of players. These guys, particularly at top level, have a way more power than they had, particularly 25, 30 years ago.
Frank, why were Chelsea such a good cup team this season during Frank's time? Oh, no, sorry. Let me do that again. Why were Chelsea such a good team during Frank's time at the club?
I think there was a mix of player coming from Europe, and that was pretty new because it was the Bosman law who allow us to come to England, and the British players like Craig, like Dennis Wise, John Spencer, and everything. So it was a mix, and we came along together very well. And I think we wanted to show to the British and to the English that we would be able to cope with the English football, and they were very nice to allowing us being good and helping us out. So I think the mix of those players allowed us to be very efficient the first year and the years after when we won 3 trophies in '98. So that's why it was. So and now with Marcus, with Craig Burley, with Dennis Wise, with Dennis Di Matteo, Zola, Vialli, Di Petrescu. I mean, that was a hell of a team, really. Steve Clark.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. That was a very, very good team. And so it's not a surprise for me that we got many trophies.
Of course, Chelsea, Craig, that was a time where the FA Cup was a big deal.
Yeah, you just try to shoehorn that FA Cup semi-final back pass in again. Is that what you're doing? I mean, you did it last week.
No, I didn't do that.
Is that you trying to shoehorn that in again? Just to go back to Frank's point, back at that point, Chelsea were a good side, they were an improving side, but they were not a side that was ready to challenge for the league over the course of 38, 40 games. So the cup was very, very important. I mean, we had the, cup final in '94 before Frank was there, semi-final again in '96, semi-final and final again in '97 after we beat Wimbledon at Highbury and then Middlesbrough in the cup final. So that was, 3 semi-finals in 3 or 4 years and 2 FA Cup finals. And to go back to the point, people think, certainly our foreign players, Frank and the Italian boys and whatnot, we used to say to them, how important is this to you? And you know what? It was almost as important to them as it was to us because, they'd grown up watching the FA Cup and the FA Cup final. And so it was hugely important to our foreign players and it meant a lot to them. You've only got to see some of the games, like that game I talk about at Highbury where Zola scored that fantastic goal. We got to the final. How important it was to the foreign players in particular, because it was always important to the British players. And I think when we had that gel and had that mix, along with the good quality players we had, that's why Chelsea were a very good cup side back then.
It's true that the only game that I could see.
No, it's not Chelsea TV. Come on.
No, it's about my childhood. I'm talking about all the foreign players. And I talked to Eric Cantona about that. We never talked about the Premier League. We couldn't see the games when we were young. But the FA Cup was the only game showed in France. And we didn't want to miss that because that was a special English game. And so it's why the Cup meant a lot to I guess, all foreign players.
What is the best goal you've ever scored, Frank?
The first goal it was with France in '95, I think, and when we won 10-0 against Azerbaijan, and I scored with a volley, but the volley I made it with my right foot and behind my left foot, like a major, I know if you see, but in the air. So that was very, very impressive from my point of view, because I never thought I would be able to do that. But I think the most important goal that I scored and the most spectacular goal that I scored was against Leicester, 19th minute, when we won 1-0 the last minute, and we won one. Yeah, it was unbelievable. The stadium, I think, was about to explode. So that was pretty impressive. Yeah.
What is the worst refereeing decision you guys have ever seen? Let's start with you, Frank.
That was against Wimbledon, the first year that I played for Chelsea, the first time that I played against Vinnie Jones and the Crazy Gang. Then they scored, we lost 4-2, I think, at home. And I tried to save the ball on the line. And I think it was Robbie Earle who jumped on me and headbutted me, but never touched the ball. And the ball went in. And the ref said that was a goal. And I had a big bump in my head. And I showed to the ref, and Vinnie Jones came to me and said, "Hey Frank, welcome to England." That was the worst referee decision, but the best quote from Vinnie Jones.
Craig, for you?
Everyone that wasn't given when I appealed to a referee. That's always the worst decision for me, I'm telling you. I appeal for everything.
Full referees.
So, maybe Graham Poll giving the 3 yellow cards. That was pretty poor. What about Pete Walton? Oh, we can't forget Pete Walton, who came out and gave the imaginary yellow card because he left his yellow cards in the dressing rooms. I've seen loads, mate. Absolutely loads. It's. I tell you what's a good one. Maybe it was back in because of the time it was. Watch a YouTube clip if you can of the tackle in the FA Cup final, Liverpool against Wimbledon back in the late 80s. Straight from the kickoff, Vinnie Jones. I know Frank touched on Vinnie Jones. Vinnie Jones absolutely mullered Steve McMahon, and I don't even think it was a yellow card. Have a butchers at that if you get a chance.
Final one. Speaking of butchers, who was the biggest butcher you played with or against, Frank?
Well, we named the one. I think Vinnie Jones at the time. Against me, he's getting tired. You know, he was getting old and getting tired, so he was always late. So he didn't touch anybody. But I would say Denis Wise. I remember that we had a friendly game against Milan at San Siro, and my former teammates, national teammate Christophe Dugarry came to see me once during the game. He said, "Can you say to your captain to slow down and calm down? It's only a friendly game." I say, "Go to tell him yourself. You know, he doesn't understand what I say. He doesn't want to understand. He's like that. He killed everybody. It was a friendly game. Nice guy out of the pitch, but the hell on the field."
Do you know what he used to do? I think I've said this before, Dan. It seems petulant, and it is, but it annoys players. It's like when he went into a tackle with you. I mean, I never played against him. I only played with him, but I watched him do it. When he went into a tackle with people, I saw him do it to Nicky Butt in the Man United game. They would be on the floor, and he would pull. It sounds stupid, but he'd pull the hairs and the other player's legs quite hard. And if you've ever had that done to you, it's a little bit sore, but it's really bloody annoying. And he used to do things like that. He used to just annoy people and wind people up. He was dirty. I tell you, a guy who I wouldn't have wanted to play against was Mick Harford. I played with Mick Harford, former striker at Chelsea. Mick was one of the hardest players that I ever came across, but an absolute gentleman off the field. And one guy, I don't know if Frank will remember this guy. He wasn't the dirtiest player I ever played with, but he was one of the craziest. He was a left back called Stéphane Mahé. He played for Rennes in France, and he came to Celtic, and he was a lot crazy, and he could put a tackle in as well. Stéphane Mahé was a little mad.
I know.
Do you remember him, Frank?
And he was a good friend of mine. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. And it's true, he played for Auxerre before, and they came to. I remember when he went to Scotland, and he adapted to the game very, very well. But he was a tough guy. But again, it's like some people when they are behind their how do you say their will in the car, they get crazy. But they are the nicest people on earth, and that's the case for Denis Wise, and that was the case for Stéphane Mahé. But you couldn't bear, or you couldn't take care of them on the field because they lost their mind.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. ESPN FC back on your screens tomorrow. Be sure to join us.